Welcome to the southwest of England in the city of Bristol. Now, Bristol might not be the first place you think about when you think about crowds and crowded places. It has a thriving culture of sports and arts. Home to Bristol City, it is the sound of bands like Tricky, Portishead and Massive Attack, who even had the sound named after them, the Bristol Sound. Possibly most well known for the Ballooning Festival that happens yearly. But what if I told you, 25 miles down the road from here, it's possibly the UK's most iconic music festival. Today we came to the Grain Barge to have a cup of coffee with a man called Jim Goddard. Jim describes himself as a freelance crowd safety manager. Not a title that everybody will know about. So let's go and find out exactly what Jim's all about. Thank you very much. Jim, thank you very much for coming and having a coffee today.
You're most welcome, mate. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. So, you have this wonderful title of a freelance crowd and safety manager. Go on, explain that to me.
Freelancing, well, been working for the crowd world for quite a while. I just went on my own, not specifically tied to any particular organisation. More a role to try and help organisations, planners, event managers, stadia, put together crowd safety plans.
Okay.
As a crowd safety manager, my key role is clearly to actually look at the whole planning process of the safety of people, making sure that for whatever event I put together or is being put together, is being done safely within not just legislative and guidance rules, but actually it's practically safe. It's putting that bit extra into it, making sure I know that this event is going to run safely, and if there's any issues that are likely to crop up, I know what they're likely to be and where they're going to be. So as a freelancer, I have probably a wider experience than just working for one organisation, one company. Bit of an ability to fix all problems, solve all issues. You have to have a very wide range of understanding. But the whole business within the whole crowd safety management world that we're all in, it just means that we have an opportunity to share those experiences. And certainly, for me, freelancing it has been a great experience because I've had a chance to learn so much from so many great people.
Do you feel that because you're freelance, you have developed quite quickly over the past few years?
Yeah, very much. I'm sure we'll discuss later on. I've come from a policing background, and coming into this industry quite late in my career really has been a very steep learning curve. But the advantage of being a freelancer has been the ability to then look at so many different events, so many different people, so many different skills, and develop my own skills along the way. So for me, yes, being freelance has actually been a great way of learning very, very rapidly and building my own portfolio of skills up, really.
So you're focusing on the crowd. How do you feel about, the understanding within events, like event managers, producers, organisers? What's your experience of them understanding the dynamic of a crowd?
Some do, but I think there's conflicting and competing demands. Probably the biggest demand of everybody is commercial. So everybody wants to run an event and make a lot of money. We all understand that. We, on our element, are looking to make sure people are kept safe, running things as safely as we can, putting things correctly together. The problem simply comes about that there can be a conflict in that. And we can be seen as being perhaps overcautious, oversafe. And I think that lack of understanding of our roles and responsibilities, and at times an understanding what crowds can do, becomes a problem which promoters, which event organisers don't quite get our world. Now, it's about trying to find that balance. We've got to understand, it's not just trying to say our world as crowd safety managers is, this is our way and it's the only way. We've got to understand what the needs of the organiser is. If they don't make sufficient money, the event's not going to go happen, so we're not going to get any work anyway. Anything to do with safety is always a competing issue. The best way of keeping something safe, don't run it.
through.
But you have to have a degree of risk, you have to have a degree of understanding. Our role, I think, is very simply, we've got to identify where those risks are and look at how to mitigate them as best we can to make it an enjoyable event, a commercial event, but a safe event.
So you just touched on that you were in the police force. So is that how you got involved in working with crowds?
Yeah, a bit of a convoluted route, really. I was a police officer for nearly 30 years. But within my policing career, I became very much involved in the public order policing.
Okay.
So dealing with, initially with football and with disorder and demonstrations in that world. And I progressed very much down that route. I ended up being the regional head of public order training.
All right.
But public order training also involved public safety. The difficulty was always within the world I was in that the police involves very much crowd control, dealing with disorder, dealing with problems. And it wasn't very much involved with the crowd safety side of it. Although the police have perhaps a belief and an understanding of crowd management and crowd safety to a degree, because of the very nature of their roles and responsibilities of police events, crowd safety and crowd management isn't really dealt with a great deal in the role. In the role I was in, I was teaching public order, public safety, and I just learned there's some gaps in my knowledge, and there's gaps in the knowledge of people I was teaching. So as a result, I then enhanced my own learning, went to university, in my own time, put myself through a couple of degrees, and from that learned, actually it was a subject which I really was fascinated in, and just developed.
So you're saying it was self-learning, so you've seen gaps in the teachings of the police and what the progression through the police and the roles you would have done in the police. You've seen some gaps in your knowledge, so you developed that yourself.
Yeah, very much. I started learning about the first real learning from the subject outside of the policing world was I went on a crowd dynamics conference and just learned various bits and pieces from Dr. Keith Still and learned the elements from that which I hadn't seen. Opened up my eyes. Peaked for me, it made me go, right, I want to learn more about this. And in my own time I started developing it. I was in a regional policing role, which meant I was away from home a large amount of time. Okay. And sitting in hotel rooms on an evening, studying. I did all my degree.
So what a wonderful life.
Yeah, so I ended up doing my degree over 3 years in hotel rooms whilst working away from home.
Goodness.
But it was a far better option for me to learn. So I was learning a process, operationally as a police officer and studying outside of the world.
So you were able to then look at the balance between, crowd control, crowd management. So you've seen the both sides of the coin.
Yep. And there is two sides to the coin. The policing of crowds and the policing of large events is hugely different to the management of crowds and the managing of events. Yeah. And the policing role is very much coming in towards the latter stages and there's very specific roles and responsibilities. Yeah. Starting from the very beginning, you take an open field and design and put together a crowd management plan, and then you have to look at the very latter bits, which is it might be some crime and disorder, might be some issues, might be some contingency plans. The police fits in that little bit. The 85-90% of the planning is non-police involved, and that really was the bit which opened my eyes. That was the bit which made me went, wow, there's a completely different side. And I think as police, when I was in the police service, we become perhaps too believing of what we're supposed to be doing. We don't realise actually there's another world. That's not to criticise the policing, it's just to say they don't have a true understanding of the whole picture. You've
not got the rounded picture that you took on just through finding an interest in it.
Absolutely, yeah, very much. And it has been an interest and it's been a fascination really. It's been something which over the last few years have just developed my own needs of wanting to learn more.
So you say you undertook this learning in the last few years of your policing career.
Yeah.
Were you able to use your learning as part of your role and spread that to your colleagues?
Yeah, very much. I was in a very fortunate position. I was a head of public order training for the whole region, Southwest region. So I had a large influence, particularly on command and control training. Okay. So I was teaching the gold, silver, bronze commanders for managing events, and I was able to develop my training massively and include a large amount of crowd dynamics, crowd safety, crowd management training.
Very good.
Working alongside the College of Policing, I was fortunate to be a part of a large project to help develop the policing events courses and the crowd dynamics courses, and so the stuff I was learning outside, I was actually bringing inside. Helped me massively because I developed my own career. You know, it was a bit of a self-developing career process. It worked out very well. But that then had the effect of getting me involved then in large amounts of events all around the region, around the country.
Okay.
So I ended up becoming a little bit specialised as a police officer in what I was doing, and it opened up more avenues.
More avenues.
So it was a fantastic experience.
What do you see to be the fundamental differences between policing and the private sector?
For the management of crowds?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose the key difference is crowd management versus crowd control.
Yeah.
And to make it very simplistic, the whole very nature of policing for crowds is not to manage the event, is to allow the event organisers to put together their plans to manage the event. If the event goes safely and there's no issues, the police don't really have a role. The policing role for crowds is more about the dealing with the disorderly crowd or the problem crowd or the crowd whereby it's having an impact on public safety in a wider place. So the police training and the police command training in particular is very much around managing the problem.
Yeah.
Whereas we, the crowd safety teams, put our side of it is to prevent the problem in the first place, to identify the planning phase, put all the plans together, ensure that the problems aren't there in the first place, and then you can actually eliminate the needs for policing. One thing I found when I came out of the police and into this world was that huge difference. We were looking perhaps at a very small section of a very big issue.
Yes.
Now that's not to 1 minute to diminish the role of the police in managing events, and they have an absolutely key role in making sure things are kept safe, and by their very mere presence can affect behaviour. A well put together policing operation in conjunction with a crowd safety manager will affect behaviour to the positive, keeps people calm, keeps people behaved, and actually nothing needs to be done. So there is a need and a role for the police. But the biggest difference I found really was that we were dealing with crowd control as a police officer.
Yeah.
And really the crowd management, the whole pulling together of a plan is not really in their world. Now as a police commander for events, when I was managing large events as a police officer, I'd have a look at the plans and see that the plans were right, but didn't necessarily understand the intricacies of it in the way that I do now. I think that's the biggest difference. And I summed up crowd control versus crowd management. Big issue in the police.
So I'm sure you've noticed this as well. Over the past few years, definitely I've seen police commanders in the planning of the meetings pushing crowd safety managers now, saying we want the proof, we want you to develop. As environments, as events become more complex, I now feel as if the police are pushing and saying, I want more from you, I want you to prove, I want to see evidence.
And I think there's a large part of that comes from the difference we've had in training, and policing as a whole and training has changed. Police commanders now quite rightly are looking at the crowd safety managers, putting the plans together and saying, I want to be assured that I don't need to step in.
Yes.
And I think that's a healthy position. The problem can be that they can look at sometimes at the wrong areas and get focused on some areas which are too specific and get very focused on key bits. But the fact that police are now realising that safety is absolutely key, and if we can design it out in the first place, there's no need for the police to get involved so much.
Yeah.
Dealing with music concerts, dealing with football stadia, I find now that there's almost a case of eliminating the policing role as much as possible. In fact, certainly working for greenfield sites, you find actually the police are saying we don't want to get involved at all, demonstrate why we don't need to be there. Certainly working in London and greenfield sites in London where the Metropolitan Police are so stretched, they are working under so many other problems, they won't provide services at all. So if you're a crowd safety manager and you're designing in the police, they're going to argue we shouldn't be there. And I actually think that's healthy.
I think it's healthy as well. It's quite unusual because it comes from Scotland, obviously. The police are still quite hands-on.
Yes.
Lots of police officers, and then you come down to somewhere like London and it's a handful.
You don't see the police.
You don't see the police at all.
And I certainly remember my early policing days, we would swarm, tens, hundreds of us at a football match or at a concert, big festivals. don't see it now. And really, they're there to pick up the pieces of, you know, if we get an arrest, if we detain somebody for a certain problem, that the police will take it on. But the policing of even disorder and disorderly behaviour within a venue, it's all down to security now to manage, and for us to manage out.
Now you've seen both sides, the private and the policing side. Do you feel as if the private industry is prepared to step in, or you know, they have the skill set to step in and replace policing?
I wouldn't like to say to replace policing, but supplement and support. To an extent, yes, and there's some very good event organisers and very good security companies who understand the roles and responsibilities, have the training, have the capability and capacity to step up, exactly as you're saying. But there are still those event organisers we deal with, you come across and they think they've got the skill set, they've got the training, but actually they haven't, and that actually can make things worse. And again, it goes back to why myself as a freelance comes in. I can look at the plans, look at the people and say, actually, we need to step this level up and change this. I still think, and I would say, I think events are safer today than they've ever been. We could all argue we could get them safer still. So yes, there's been a withdrawal of policing, but I think the increase in safety skills and safety developments have made things much safer. Yeah, very much.
Excellent. So as you say, the industry's developing, the private sector's especially developing. What do you see as how crowd management is going to move forward within the UK now?
So I think the two key issues we've got, large events are becoming very popular, and local authorities pulling together free events in public places, your Christmas light switch-ons, your carnivals, those sort of events, which bring a lot of people into complex environments, but actually bring large people in to bring commercials into a city. Those complexities then become who takes that responsibility, who's got the ownership of risk. People see bringing 10,000 people into a city centre to switch on Christmas lights being a wonderful experience, but not understand actually that dynamic problem comes with it. So that's one of the issues, that big events are becoming more popular and concerts and festivals becoming very much the trend for them. But the other issue is, of course, the security issue, the terrorism threats, the threats we face generally. So we're now bringing in large groups of people into a confined space. So we then have to design in or design out that threat. And I think the biggest complex I'm finding, certainly for the different events I get involved with now, is looking at not just the crowd safety element of the normal things we would have considered for crowd movement, crowd dynamics, crowd behaviours, but also of the fear of somebody doing something unexpected. You know, the lone individual who's going to take an action. But not only that, it's taking out the fear from the crowd themselves, because whilst we have to deal with and working with our police colleagues and security services the reduction of that threat, the public coming to the event have an angst of being there. So it's actually making them feel we're putting something in place which makes them feel safe, but it's not so oppressive as making them think they're a threat. That's actually the challenge of the future. Making sure venues are being secured safely in a counter-terrorism type nature without it feeling it has been done so. And that's designing it in with your security advisors, with your counter-terrorism advisors, putting those plans in place. But all those issues in turn, by putting those natures in place, actually affect crowd management, crowd safety, crowd movements anyway. So the two actually work really well together. The biggest challenge I foresee for the moment coming up, though, is whilst we have the popularity of large events is growing, then you have people coming in who think they can put an event together without realising the skill set which is required.
It goes along with it.
And there becomes a separate set of issues. You then get the rogue event which gets thrown up. People don't see what the risks are. And that causes a range of problems.
It was quite interesting you mentioning, you know, the risk of the terror threat just now. I remember planning myself some large-scale events right after the Manchester attack, and it was key in everybody's mind. They wanted to feel they were in a safe environment. Do you feel like private sector can step up and do that? Do you feel that event organisers have the skill set, or they're relying more on policing giving them advice?
I think you're right. After the tragic events of recent years, there was for a while, it was quite difficult putting events together, and people were very angst of those problems. What I have noticed is the public actually want to see security,
Okay.
and we've gone from security being a hidden feature
Yes.
for a while. Nobody wants to see
See.
nobody wants to see police. Nobody wants to see security. Yellow jackets were hidden everywhere. Now, actually, as you come through the cordons of security, both before and after event,
Event.
the amount of times you're seeing public coming up to us and saying, "Thank you for keeping us safe.
Yes.
Thank you for what you're doing."
Yeah.
And I think that the one thing that this private sector have done is recognise that actually being highly visible, being very informative, being communicative with people makes people feel safe. And if people feel safe at an event, they're going to have a better time. So I think the private sector have stepped up to that gap. I think also that we've brought in the right skill set, the right people to understand the security risk, to understand the searching process, to understand the assessments, your counter-terrorism security advisors, etc., who are coming in now and giving good quality advice, and people are listening to it and doing it.
So, if we're talking about the private sector, event organisers, private security, things like that, where do you see the relationship going forward between themselves and the blue light services, especially the police?
I think more and more the police are going to have to step away. There just isn't the resources. The bottom line is that the public sector funding is just not there to provide policing. I'm finding it becoming more and more partnership in terms of the police supporting in the planning phase, and like you said earlier about challenging and questioning, and the police wanting to become more and more satisfied that the event organiser is putting together a safe event.
Yeah.
And I do think the one thing the police training has done in recent years is really taught police commanders to question and where to question, to understand.
Yes.
And if the police recognise there's a threat and we as an event organiser or crowd safety manager aren't stepping up to it, they become more intrusive. Now, for the less competent, less experienced, less capable event organisers, that makes an uncomfortable development, and that makes them feel, or the police are becoming very difficult. But they're doing it for the right reasons. I find now that relationships with local police commanders, certainly for greenfield events, where before they were coming, the answer was always no, we're not going to let you do anything.
Yeah.
Now they're actually going, we can see what you can do, we understand your role.
Yeah.
The event organiser is able to demonstrate something competently, and I think that becomes a better process. So I see that development growing.
So, do you think it's a natural step for, ranking officers when they leave the police to step into events, especially if they came from that side? Do you think, it'd be more beneficial to the industry if more officers?
There is some benefit, and as somebody who's obviously done that, I've did quite well within the policing service. I've stepped over. I had the benefit, of course, of being doing additional qualifications and doing training, and I had the benefit of seeing both sides. The problem is for many police commanders, I've seen it in our industry, who've come across and think they can still manage it as if they're still the police.
Yeah.
And that causes some rub. But I do think there is a benefit by having people who are able to cope in a crisis when they've got a set of circumstances going wrong or can become a problem. Having somebody who understands the process of delivery and process of driving something through, I think that's key. And there is definitely a place for the police to come into that. But I think there's a number of police senior commanders who think they can step straight into it. 3 years down the line, I'm still learning every single day, and you realise, the world I knew up to then was then. I've got to move on to elsewhere.
It's amazing because I'm sure I'm just like most of the private sector. I'll look at the police and we think, yeah, all trained, crisis management, handle everything, and then sometimes you see a situation in a crowd and they're going, oh, I've got a problem. You're going, no, it's fine, because they've just not got that.
And that's a really good point. That when we deal with large crowds, large movement, large change of behaviour, for example, dynamics behaviour. That is particularly for the rank and file officers on the ground who aren't used to seeing how the dynamics change. Let's take a mosh pit in front of a stage.
Been there. Been there.
We'll look at that and go, okay, it's developing. We've got to put some things in place. Whereas the police managers and police commanders looking at that will think we've got a real serious crisis. We've got to be aware of our risks, we've got to be aware of what's going on around it, and look at how it's now dynamically developing. But that behaviour is not experienced by police officers, so when they're seeing that for the first time, particularly if they're in a control room seeing it on a CCTV from above, where it looks not dissimilar to disorder. That's where you realise, there's a difference in understanding. And I think that because police aren't often on site and don't see that. They're not exposed to those experiences. That's when they become out of line. Whereas you and I are now looking at it and go, okay, we can deal with it, we've got to put this in place.
It wouldn't be the first time a police officer in ranking commanders asked me to stop a mosh pit.
That's not quite going to happen.
No. It's like, even over this weekend, I've been speaking to some officers on the ground and try to keep up with the dynamic of a crowd and understanding of crowds, and especially the volume of events happening. To me, football crowd's quite simple. It's, we do have complexity in there, but when you start getting to large outdoor events, from heavy metal to dance events to reggae, it's hard to understand.
And it's also, it's some of the events we put together in London, where you have 3 days, the same venue for 3 days, 3 completely different dynamics of crowd. And trying to get people to realise that actually, this crowd's not going to be like yesterday's crowd and not going to be like tomorrow's crowd. And I think those are the areas where policing is quite limited as well. A lot of good commanders are learning it and developing it and understanding, want to develop themselves in it. But a lot of the rank and file don't see that position. And it's a really good point that you to get them to understand that actually a different act has a different dynamic and different behaviour.
It's just such a vast field, and I can understand why police officers sometimes will make the wrong call. Even when they go up the ranks, they'll start saying, "Why is this happening? What's going on?" And
absolutely.
You look round the crowd safety managers, and they're all standing going, "This is just normal. It's normal behaviour." Actually, I was thinking it was going to be a bit more extreme.
But the interesting bit then comes when it does become, for example, disorder. And you see the security who are very good at dealing with the dynamics of crowds in a normal way, but when it becomes a disorder level, the police have a specific role to step in, and they will put themselves in that position of danger, whereas our security staff are not really trained or experienced to do that role.
It is quite interesting. You're just saying that, right? Because the amount of criticism you see getting put towards the private sector of, they weren't doing their job, training and everything. And you look at them, they've possibly got a high-vis jacket on, maybe sit a course or two, compared to an officer who's got, protective clothing on, got the equipment to deal with disorder. And it's having the capability and capacity.
So the police themselves may not have all of the capacity, the numbers to deal with the issues we deal with, but they've got the capability. We in the security world and in the security world, we have the capacity, we can put large numbers to an event, but then it also has that capability. And the two need to be alongside each other. So that's why you're absolutely right. You'll see people with a large number of yellow jackets and will assume, they can step in the same as a cop can. But actually that skill set's very different, that training's very different. You have somebody who Monday to Friday might be working as an employee for a different organisation. On Saturday putting a yellow jacket on, they've had 2 weeks of 2 weekends of doing a bit of training, and now they're expected to deal with a large piece of disorder. It's not the world they're all in.
It's also, as the industry develops, it's all becoming more focused on customer service and the level of service we give you.
Absolutely.
So the people that are getting targeted to come and work at events now, it's all about presentation, service, delivery, and the old image, the very old image now of doormen and bouncers is starting to go away. So these people coming into this now don't want to be involved in physical activity.
The three key assets of safety, security, service. We have to have a balance. But the biggest one, I still think you're right, is service. That people will look at the service of people, giving people a good experience. We've got to look at the safety side of it and the security side of it. But getting that balance right between safety, security and service, it's quite a challenge.
It is. I got to admit, Jim, we could possibly talk about this
we could do hours of this.
And the cows go home. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for coming out.
Great meeting you again.
Thank you again. What an absolute pleasure of a conversation that was. Jim has seen both sides of the tale. He's been in the police, now he's freelance. Jim is one of those people that is expanding the safety of events. I look forward to seeing Jim on more events, and if you're ever in Bristol, pop down to the Grain Barge. They do a fantastic coffee. Hope you all have a great day. Catch you later.